I said I struggled with the whole thing until we came back from the Summer Institute of Linguistics where we've been accepted, and I got on my knees and asked God to show me. I said, I really need to know, and asked for a sign.
I asked God that He would show the people in our town in Treysa and show me that this was His kindergarten, not something man-made. That was very big for me. Then going to the city hall, I introduced myself. They encouraged me, but only because they never thought it would come about.
And I was a new Christian, but I asked him to let me know by a certain date whether or not, a letter would come from Wycliffe saying, we can use you. Because they had told Fred they weren't sure they could use a man of his qualifications, that maybe he was too highly qualified to go out and build outhouses for translators. And so I prayed, and then I called my best friend and said, this is how I prayed. I think the thought that came to my mind was September 15th, and I was praying this in August. And I said, would you pray with me that letter will come on September 15th? And she said she would, but I did not tell Fred until the night of September 14th. And then I said, when will we be hearing from Wycliffe? And he said, well, back then we didn't have email. It was all airmail letters. So from August and now till September, he said, oh, it'll be a long time yet. And I said, well, I think it might be tomorrow. And told him why and how I prayed. And he prayed with me that if that's what I needed, God would do it. And the next day the letter was in the mailbox.
China and Africa, I was going to go to Africa. Carl was going to go to China. And we landed up in Brazil. But that's his story.
I'm going to get Carl's side of the story too. I want to ask you one more thing. Yeah. Do you have, you may or may not have an answer for this. Was there a one person in that process that you would say was the biggest influence on you?
There were two. One was during high school, and she and her husband were going to go to India as a missionary. And they went out to California to catch the ship, and he played a game of basketball and fell, hit his head, and died.
Oh my goodness.
And so she came back to our area, but still was very mission-minded. And so I had that. She was quite a bit older, so I suppose you could call her a mentor during the high school days.
It wasn't until later on. Even when I got my degree, I had one chemistry course where I really studied and studied, and I failed it. Failed that one test, and I'm thinking, what's going on, Lord? I studied, but I didn't get it. I went to a counselor after that. It was a Christian counselor. And after about 2 or 3 sessions, she said, Carolyn, how did you learn? How did you learn to read? And as I shared with her, she said, it sounds like you may have a learning disability. And I thought, finally, someone put a word, a finger on it, what it was.
And then at Bethel, there was Alma Bjork. They were with our mission in China, and her husband was taken captive by the communists, and she came back to the U.S., and she was at Bethel, and she was one of the speakers. And we're still in email contact with her. I mean, it's been a long history of friendships there, and she was a good influence.
I think that's one of those messages that I like to capture as I've been getting these video interviews, of how strategic, if you want to use that word, that God can place some of us in people's lives, for high school teachers, for people that you're hanging around church with, or someone that's an influence on you at a college or whatever. I just, I want to look right in the camera sometimes and just say, don't miss those opportunities to shape a high schooler. Don't miss those opportunities to try to take your heart and put it into the heart of one that's younger than you, because they may end up doing the things that are in your heart to do.
And a 10-year difference is important.
It is very, yes.
And she says, you learn to hide it. but you don't have to do it like everybody else does. And that was a freeing thing to me.
When you realize you've learned how to compensate and remediate for that, which is still amazing.
Yeah.
But then now that you can figure out how to put that all into
and I
its
said,
proper place.
don't worry now. The teacher says do it this way. If this is the way you feel like you can learn it, go ahead. But if not, do it
And if
the
you've
way
got a way
you're
that
supposed to
works.
do it. So that was freeing to me. And so I looked at myself and said, okay,
I can do
you
this.
can do it. You can do it. With the Lord's help, I can do it.
But you can't help but say these things. When I found out about Wheaton College as a junior in high school at Christmas time, for the first time I heard the name Wheaton. A student from my church came home and said, hey, where are you going to college? I said, I'm looking for this kind of college. He said, about Wheaton. And I said, what's Wheaton? And he told me. When I felt the Lord leading, I applied, I was accepted. I told my father's parents, they were so excited because from the time I'd been about 5, they prayed I would go to Wheaton College.
Wow.
Never told me, never mentioned the name. And my maternal grandmother prayed for 4 years that I would go to Wheaton College and never told me the name, never mentioned it to me. So, when you see those kind of things, you kind of go,